This lesson is limited color, the Velazquez palette. The Velazquez palette is composed of yellow ochre, burnt sienna, black, ivory black, and or Payne's gray, and French ultramarine. Usually the artist, if it likes a little bit of a bluish hint, will go for the French ultramarine. It will make a little stronger green. When you mix the yellow ochre and the burnt sienna, you're going to get an orange. When you mix the black and the yellow ochre, you're going to get a green. And we're going to do a very simple study. I'm going to show you this picture, which is a limited palette watercolor, and it's just of an oak tree, and only 3 colors: yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and in this case I did use a bit of French ultramarine with the black because it does make a prettier green. And it's very difficult to abstract your art. It's much easier to see a tree as a tree, but a lot of times when you understand that you're painting a painting and not a tree, you'll have a much better picture. Being locked into doing realism is a wonderful thing, but it's wonderful also to abstract and create and be very original. And I applaud people that can go forward in creative abstract. I like to work in landscape. I'm very keen on subject matter. And so for that reason, you will see more realistic things like trees and houses and people and fences and distant hills and roads. These are the things that attract me, and I like very much to do landscape like this. Now, this tree has used burnt sienna, several values. It's used a bit of black with the burnt sienna to create a dark brown. It has used the French ultramarine with a little bit of black to cast a shadow to create a bit of a warmer cast shadow. Over here is a colder cast shadow in just a straight ivory black. And it's all right to go warm and cool, light and dark, bright and dull. Those are the components when you begin to work with color. Now, we are going to start this drawing with doing a pencil drawing and just being very careful to use a pencil that will not scar the paper. And mentioning that is really important. Since we are going to be working on a paper that won't carry a lot of water, because this is a sketch pad, I'm going to sketch with a number 2. And I'm doing just a simple oak tree, just like the painting I showed you. And I'm trying to be very simplified in what I'm doing. And I'll get this turned so I can bring the drawing pad a little closer. I hope that is very visible to you. There we go. So here we have our tree, and we have it almost like when you work with children, you can show them your hand and say, well, it's like a hand. And then you draw your outline. So the steps in drawing a tree would first be the structure, then would be the outline, which would be the foliage. And the foliage is done in blocks, solid. Remember, it's 3-dimensional. There is this side, there's this side, and that side. So it moves like this. So there's a solidity to it. It isn't just a line, but is a solid form. And you could do that by changing the direction of your pencil. And here are some little branches up here that are visible. And my tree is going to go right off the top of the paper. You don't want to just stop it here. Let it go up. It gives the eye a chance to move upward and gives a feeling of a bigger painting. And remember, you're the artist. You could create anything you want to create. You are an original, and you are not copying anyone. As I said earlier, it is all right, as you're working with a teacher, to follow along what the teacher is showing you. But when you finally come down to your own work, be creative. Usually a good teacher will set somebody off with ideas and then maybe show up a half hour later to see how they're doing. I love landscape, and this is a wonderful way to teach, is to give your demonstration early on, perhaps in studio, then show the scene they're going to do, then set the students out to do their work and follow along a half hour later, give suggestions as they're rendering, and move around so you do see each student several times during a session. And then at the end of the day, you all gather back for an hour critique. And everybody holds their picture up and says, wow, this is great. This is wonderful. I didn't see that. Where did that part come from? And you know, you share with other students, and it's such a wonderful way to learn, is when you have others that are doing the very same thing you're doing. Now, I, for the most part, have finished drawing the structure and the outline of this tree. And I'm going to stay with this tree for just a moment before I show you the rest of my plan. I do have a thought for other things, but I think time is of an essence. So we're going to start with perhaps just, and you know what we're going to do? We're going to start right in with some watercolor. And I have my palette handy. And if you are working with me, we're going to switch a little bit and do a light wash. I have an Altman palette, round just like this, and the colors are carried cool on one side, warm on the other, just like the color lesson we had a couple of sessions ago. And I'm going to use primarily 3 brushes, maybe 4. And these brushes, one of them is a flat, and it's called an aquarelle, and it's a chisel edge like this. A real favorite, comes in various sizes. I'm using this wonderful round. This one is a number 6, and it's my favorite. It comes to a beautiful point. It is actually a sable, so it has its wonderful qualities. Now, a brush is very important. And as we talk about this in watercolor, the ferrule is the shiny part, and the brushes, the little brush hairs, are placed in the ferrule one at a time. And the Kolinsky family that produced the best brushes long ago has a great reputation for making wonderful brushes. And I also like this one because it has kind of like a little dip, and the artist can, it kind of fits beautifully in your hand, and when you're working, it just, I don't know, I just love it. Okay, now I'm going to start my painting with a technique which I think I've already explained. It's called Lost and Found Edge. And I'm going to allow myself to use French ultramarine with my Payne's gray and or ivory black. That's my cool side. And I'm going to start very lightly with the background, a pale French ultramarine in what will be the sky holes, not too much water, because this paper doesn't accept water. And I'm using it because it's a wonderful sketch pad, and it's wonderful sketch size. Now, just very lightly, Lost and Found Edge. And already you can see the tree begin to pop. You don't need to have an outline around it, but of course in this case we started with a line drawing. Now all of these little sky holes I'm going to identify beforehand with pale ultramarine. And I'm just going to go right in behind the tree with a bit of French ultramarine. And I'm going to leave it a bit like a vignette. All right. And There'll probably be clouds out this way too, so I'll just go that direction. Not too much water, but I can show enough to show you the third color. All right, I kind of like that already. It's very hard for me not to want to do a full watercolor, but I'm going to kind of indicate some clouds here. I think that's really fun. I want to be careful not to put too much water because this paper will easily tear. All right, so I have a suggestion of clouds, and you can see how I've just sort of tiptoe through the tulips, making it very light, very, very fun. It's just going to be a sweet little drawing. Okay, are you ready? Let's go for the warm tone. And I'm going to look for my yellow ochre in my almond palette. And the almond palette is a favorite. It goes back so many years. I guess it was used in England. A lot of the work we get that is so excellent comes from England. And also the work of the early artist Winslow Homer. He is the patron artist, the patron saint, they call him, of the art world. He painted in Maine, the lighthouses on the East Coast. And his work is just so beautiful. And he did oils, and he also did watercolors. I like them both. But the oils that he did were done on the coast in storms. And he had a little cart that he dragged behind a horse, I guess. I don't know how he got there, but he sat in this little cart and he painted out there in storms, and his work is just so magnificent. I love Winslow Homer. Okay, so now I'm going to do yellow ochre, and I'm just going to flow down over the, what is going to be, this is the warm side coming this direction. I forgot to tell you that. I just decided. Warm side, yellow ochre. Warm side, yellow ochre. Oh, here and here and here. All right, are you with me? I hope some of you are painting right along. I do tend to go kind of fast, so you'll have to excuse me. I'll try to consider my audience here. The yellow will be here also because it's high up and it's catching the light on this side. All right, now the next thing, and that's going to dry really fast because I haven't used much water. Maybe while that's settling in a little bit, I'll go over here and sketch in some other things that might happen here. I'm going to show, I guess, a little bit of distance. What else will I use? Let me think for just a minute. I want to be really careful of what I do because there's going to be some more trees, possibly over here. And I'm just going to be very carefully, randomly sketching in a few that will be like foliage, kind of like this. And I'll see where they go later. But I do want to locate them, and they may be for the second session. And then this is going to be like a meadow. And the trees are going to reflect casted shadows. And I love to do this. Cast shadows from trees that are outside of the picture. It helps to fill in the space, and oh my. And that's kind of why I wanted to indicate what was going to happen here. Okay. I'm still concerned with the horizon lines. So for the sake of my students, I will make sure you know there is a horizon line here. Right. I'm having a great time. I hope you are too. The next color I want to submit is burnt sienna. We're going to come right in here, and we're going to start the tree. And remembering that it's darker on that side, away from the sun, and it'll be darker up in here. And I'm starting just by covering with a middle value, just like that, okay? Now, the next thing, I'm going to go into the black, and I'm going to combine the black with the French ultramarine. And here, I'm going to cast a shadow of the oak tree. And it's going to just go this way, like a steamroller rolled over it. There we go. And it's just a little bit random and a little bit loose. Doesn't have to be exact. You could be an impressionist and just have a little bit of variation by shaking the brush a bit and just having a little fun with it. Just like that. All right. Now the next thing to do is make sure your drips and so on don't go past where you want them to be. Again, I'm a watercolor artist, so it's really easy for me to get too involved with it and make it too wet, and I don't want it too wet. Let me see if you can see that. All right. The next thing is I'm going to take the yellow ochre, and I'm going to take the French ultramarine, and I'm going to create a green tone and come on in here. And I'm going to use, and I've been using for the most part only one brush. So this might be a good time to do the chisel, because the chisel is great for showing planes and moving in different directions. So I'm going to go back up here where there's less light and the foliage is darker and deeper, and I'm going to turn the shape of the brush, moving it in different directions to create a sense of 3-dimension. Again, that's up to you. You could do this just by turning your brush in different directions, and all of a sudden there seems to be a sense of flow and foliage that's working here. Limited palette. You can't get into too much trouble with that. You know, one of the problems with artists and painters in general, I think, is they don't have a carefully thought out selected palette. And I really don't like to be critical, and I try not to be, but I do know that it's important to choose a palette and let it be very familiar to you. There are literally hundreds of colors, and a person could get lost in trying to make a decision and making combinations and color charts and all those things, and really lose the moment of painting. And we really need to seize the moment. I mean, when you're excited about a subject and the sun is moving, you've got about 2 hours max to make a beautiful drawing or painting before it changes, and you'll have a whole another different scene. Or maybe the boat you're doing simply leaves, or maybe clouds come in, maybe it rains. I've been caught in rainstorms and all kinds of things over the years, and it's always been wonderful. It's always been fun. I absolutely love to paint. And so we started this little segue here with the thought of having a palette. Know what palette you like and stick to it. Let it be your special palette. And so here we are. I'm showing you my Velazquez palette. 3 colors that you really can't get into too much trouble with. We have yellow ochre, we have French ultramarine, and we have burnt sienna. And I've been showing you how to take a chisel brush and turning the brush in different directions and create volume. And that's what we're after. Now, a third value might come in here later on. If you want to go in even as dark as this, and you pull a color with less water, and you can pull in a really dark shade. It's easy to bring it up very hard to take it out. But it's kind of nice to have 3 values so the painting isn't weak and lifeless. So how do you get to the next value? You use much less water. So if you want to use just straight without soaking it in the water, you have a pure pigment that just flows that way. All right, now I'm going to leave the foliage for a minute. I think I've showed you several different things, and later on you go back in and you could also add the leaves and little designs and things that you might want up in the tree. Okay, I'm going to add now a darker color down here, and this would be burnt sienna and French ultramarine, or maybe in this case I'll use the black and darken this side of the tree. And now we could show the bark, the texture, and many other little things that happen. There might be the bark that's fallen off and left a hole in the tree. So you start developing the tree. I love to use the rigger because with the rigger you can come up here and do these wonderful, very thin branches like this, little twigs, and looks very professional and fun to bring these little things in like this. I love it. All right. Now I think we've almost done enough for one session. So I'm going to invite you to tune in next time and we'll finish the entire composition.